My name is Luyamba Mpamba Kapembwa, and I work for the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. I head the Mergers and Monopolies Department, and our primary focus is to assess mergers and acquisitions, these applications that come before the Commission for their approval. And the assessment is conducted in order to determine whether they will, uh, they will have any anti-competitive effect on the market. We also regulate monopolies. So these are dominant firms that operate in various markets, and we have to regulate their conduct on the market so that they don't frustrate other smaller players and allow for a competitive flow in terms of competition in the marketplace. In relation to my background, educational background, I hold an economics degree and also a degree in law. I I have a master's of arts in international business, as well as a master's in business and administration. I also hold a postgraduate diploma in lecturing methodology, which I attend from the University of Lusaka. In terms of why I'm drawn to this area uh, of expertise, I feel competition law is a niche market, um, a a niche market which is a blend between economics and law. And because I am I am passionate about promoting fair market practices. The relationship between effective public procurement and waste is quite significant, but it's also multifaceted. Um, Effective public procurement can in itself lead to savings. So you have reduced waste, and this can be achieved in a number of ways. For example, you attain cost efficiencies. Effective procurement processes allows one to ensure that all the resources they have are spent wisely because you are buying those goods and services at much lower prices. There's also the aspect of quality assurance. When your processes are effective and watertight, you find that the products or services that you get of quality, and organizations are less likely to receive defective products or substandard products because your process is quite clear and stringent. Um, there's also what you may call supplier engagement. You need to know your suppliers in the market. As procurement officers, you not need only know the prices of the goods and services on the market, but also the players, the suppliers of that particular product and service that is being offered in the market. You have to know them and you have to engage them. This is from a procurement officer's point of view. So that engagement is very critical. Also, when it comes to decision making processes, where you have streamlined procurement processes, it's very easy to reduce on time and resources that are spent on decision making because everything is quite clear and you minimize on administrative waste as well as improve on overall efficiency for the organization. Where you also have clear cut public procurement processes, it calls for higher levels of compliance and living up to standards by those suppliers. Because where you have a poorly designed product or procurement process enforcement, you actually risk as an organization in receiving or buying products that are of substandard and not compliant to any standard. Therefore, you need to ensure that all the products and services that are being procured adhere to the regulations that have been set in order to reduce on waste. Uh, when you talk of procurement, it also comes with it innovation because where there's competition, for you to have the better product, you need to keep consistently innovating on your product. So it also leads to creative and effective procurement strategies that are employed by these suppliers. In terms of anti-competitive conduct in public procurement, these can manifest in several ways, and these can include bid rigging. So, for example, bid rigging is where competitors collude to set bid prices, or they can actually allocate projects amongst themselves. Bidders can also engage in what you call price fixing. So, this is where the bidders actually agree on the price rather than competing amongst themselves. They agree on one price. They can also engage in market division or market allocation. When they divide markets, they can actually divide a country into regions. For example, take Zambia. They can divide Zambia into four regions: the north, the southern, the west, and the eastern. And they also agree to refrain from competing in those different regions. So they'll allocate the regions. If there are four competitors, they allocate the regions amongst the four of them, and none of the parties can compete or take part to tenders or bids in any other region other than that is allocated to them. We also have what you call fake bids. So a fake bid could actually involve one company that incorporates maybe four different companies, and all these four companies bid in a tender to create that illusion that there's competition taking place, when in actual fact, all those four belong to one shareholder. So they tend to also set unfair, what you'd call unfair qualification criteria for especially for new entrants to take part in these bids. So all these actions can actually undermine the integrity of the procurement process. And this in itself has a direct effect on high prices and reduced quality in terms of goods and services that are sold. Now, tender uh, procedures need to be carried out and designed in such a way that they will help prevent or hinder, they'll help promote competition and hinder these catalytic tendencies. Cartels are very detrimental to the economy because these cause a lot of waste in terms of taxpayer, and it causes governments to lose a lot of money in terms of them not paying a fair price for the goods and services that they bid for. But also, it has a direct impact on consumers because it reduces the the ability of choice for consumers, because you remain with very few uh, services or goods that are offered on the market. So care really has to be given when we're designing these tender processes in order to avoid any unwarranted catalytic tendencies on the market. In relation to the potential harm that can manifest from these seemingly anti-competitive conduct, of course, they will include in wasted taxpayers' money. There's that diminished trust in government processes and procedures. You have the inefficient allocation of resources, as well as detrimental impacts that is felt on public welfare and service delivery. So, in the long term, it can create barriers to entry for new suppliers. It can stifle competition, and it can also perpetuate this unending cycle of inefficiency and corruption. So, whenever cartels impact public procurement, that potential to cause great harm is always there, because public procurement does involve a large portion of government's budgets and expenditure. So, from experience, we have seen that catalytic tendencies tend to take long periods of time. They tend to exist for a long period of time. Some have lasted for over 10 years. And in those 10 years, devastating effects can arise as a result of having this cartel in place. It negatively impacts markets. So while these cartels can actually emerge in ordinary markets, um, it is also crucial that we look at the procurement regulations. How strong are they? How tight are they? So when we're developing these tender processes, we need to minimize collusion among market players as much as we can. When these processes allow for competitors to easily collude, then that becomes a problem. Collusion must not be made easy for bidders, it must be made difficult, and we can only do that if our procurement processes are watertight. So, whenever formal rules are put in place that govern public procurement and they make it easy for competing bidders to communicate, then just know that the potential of collusion is there. So, at all costs, this should be avoided. Governments and competition authorities can actually prevent anti competitive conduct when it comes to public procurement. This can be done in them implementing and enforcing what you'd call stringent regulations and guidelines for procurement processes in order to establish some form of equity and fairness for all bidders. They can also engage in conducting regular audits. Regular audits would be an avenue for the government to identify potential irregularities and deter them before they are actually entrenched. They can also set clear penalties for any abrogation of these procurement processes and guidelines, have stringent penalties that will act as a deterrent factor for would be bidders that want to engage in any anti competitive conduct. Other strategies that the government and competition authorities can use, for example, in order to deter any manner or form of any anti competitive conduct, is looking out for sectors that are prone to bid rigging. These are sectors usually that have very few market players or bidders in terms of when it comes to bidding, you always have a small number of bidders because these are the only bidders that probably exist or operate in a given sector. So when you have very few, it makes it easy to engage in bid rigging. Also, uh, the competition authorities can focus on those markets where there's been very little market entrance. So you have these incumbents sitting in the market, but very little entry has happened into that market, which makes it very um, difficult for potential bidders to actually enter into that market. So that's difficult, it's hard, or just time consuming. So you have to look at all these barriers that make that market to be very difficult to enter. Procurement officers should also learn, they need to be trained. These officers need to learn to gather information about the market, be it the suppliers, the prices, or any other information about the market. You need to know how the market operates. The bidding process can also should also be used to encourage a wider participation of bidders. You cannot always have very few bidders at a given time, but encourage wider participation. If the bid project is very big and involves colossal funds, try to break it down into portions that will encourage even small players to take part of participate in any part of those big projects. Where, for example, if larger bidders bid for this project, you allow the bid project to take in subcontracted smaller bidders. So it encourages this wider participation of bidders. Um, Tender procedures also need to be very clear and concise. They should not be very difficult to comprehend for those market players that want to take part in any bid that is taking place. And also, um, it is important that you make it very difficult for bidders to communicate. Don't bring bidders in one room where they will know who their potential competitors are for a particular bid. Make it very difficult for them to know who else is taking part in that bid that is being offered by the government.